Welcome to today's episode where we will be with Sketchpoetic, Sheila Darcey. I'm Aaron Jack, your host here with Doing Good HQ, where you, the artist, can also be the philanthropist. Thank you so much for joining and being with us here today. We're going to have Sheila on here in a moment and bring us together with today's moment in time. We're going to be here discussing, being, and enjoying today. I really appreciate you, the audience, being here every week and exploring the beautiful life and what it can be and who we are. So thank you. Let's have Sheila Darcey on here. We're going to have little requests thing go on and invite and be here today. So thank you so much for joining, for being here.
Good morning or evening for you.
It's all a very relative time.
I know. I feel like doing a Robin Williams, good morning.
Do it.
No, I'm terrible. I'd be terrible at it. The glass might crack if I do it.
But that's the beautiful thing, is that we come here. And so I'm just wondering, how do you find technology and art integrating into our future?
Oh, I think it's a given, because art for me is a cultural foundation. Art really is the strongest representation, in my opinion, of history and what's happened in society and where we're going. And so for me, art is that, and technology is simply, to me, a medium, a channel, a tool, a platform just to amplify the message. So I think if you are a person that is all about driving with purpose and intention, you can use technology for good to amplify. And we've seen that obviously time and time again in this past couple of years. We've also been seeing it being used for, obviously for bad things as well, but it's really around the message that you're sending out. But yeah, art and technology to me are a natural fit if you're using it for good.
How do you see that moving forward as we look at using the technology for good and how it integrates with art and messaging?
Well, I think you have to look at technology in the different facets of technology, right? There's, like I said, the channel, the vehicle of communication. There is the actual use of technology to create the art. A lot of digital artists out there, AI, VR, people trying to use the technology and the innovation around it to basically innovate their work. And then there's the technology in terms of where you were going, which is the philosophical. Like, when does humanity stop and technology start? And it's becoming really blurry. And so I think what's important in the work that I do with arts and healing, and this is the reason I am in the spaces I'm in, is emotions, thoughts, experiences, whatever it is, that is at the fundamental base of our experience, independent of art, independent of technology. And you've got to go where people are. And people are here. They're in social media. They're in, Twitter. They're in Instagram. They're in all these places. And it would behoove us all to meet people where they're at, because if we don't, then we're missing a whole segment of our society that needs to hear this message. So for me, art is just an expression of our inner world being expressed out.
How do you find that going back and forth between the online and in person, and that intermixing between that, the representation, and the physical, and the layers of representation?
Yeah, I think it's complex. I don't think there's a simple answer to your question. The reality is, some people feel very comfortable in the digital sphere because they can create a persona and avatar, right? But the thing is, and the challenge is, how can you present yourself in that digital sphere but still be authentically, and I know that word is overused a lot, authentic, but really still be who you are, so that when people see you, so if I saw you, Aaron, in Berlin, I would get the same exact experience. But that's a testament to who you are and the energy that you're expressing and the the messaging and in the way you're showing up, technology doesn't prohibit that. You can use it as a protection and as a shield, but that's your choice. So the way I show up with you and in this platform is the same way I'm going to show up if we're meeting at a coffee shop in Los Angeles. So listen, I've heard a lot of people have a lot of negative things to say about technology, but I've been in the space since the dot-com bubble. I mean, I've been fascinated by technology, but I'm a purist at heart. Like, I'm all about the heart, the mind, the body, and the spirit. And so I consider myself a bridge builder in that sense. I don't hate technology. I don't think it's all bad, but I also see how people use it and skew it for bad. And so my goal and my entire presence is trying to bring that and bridge that, those two together. And I've always done that. I've always felt like I've been able to bridge two different worlds just based on my own experiences.
Now, I'm curious about this, like, bridging of the world as we talk about, like, technology and art and, like, the humanity. How do you find that not only you're able to do that, but what would you say to others as they go into that world and more into this digital realm of expressing the self or being the authentic self and finding this interrelationship?
I might get a little philosophical, which I have a sense you would love. I think, and I say philosophical because I think that I believe the power of technology is that it's accelerated and it's amplified. So when you're in the digital sphere, it feels very fast and it feels very potent. Like there's an intensity and an energy in it that is very, very palpable. I think for anyone that's ever been in the space, it's just everything's moving so fast. It's always on. But if we take a moment to reflect on how we show up in the external physical world, you find that it's a very similar, and if you're not mindful of it, and if you have a hard time slowing down, being present, you're actually caught up in the same thing. The reason it's so different is it's in a container of this border. And so that's why when I sketch, and my entire purpose and mission is to elevate art as a tool for healing, is when I'm sketching on a piece of paper, which is a container, and I'm able to express it out. So for me, a piece of paper and this platform of social media is very similar to me. It is what can I say? What can I express in this container that can bleed beyond the borders of it, right? So it's the ripple effect. And so for me, it's all about the impact you make in that moment of time. So this is just a moment of time. That's all it is. You can frame it with all of the technology and, all the things that people, crap all over technology for, but it's a moment of time. It's an instance of connection, but do you use it for that? It's an instant to connect back to ourselves too. And that's what I mean by it's philosophical for me. It's not about, the vehicle and the what I mean? The ethereal, it's more ethereal for me. If that makes sense. I hope that makes sense.
I think perfectly. I think it's very interesting how we're talking about, like, the container of the technology and the bleeding, and as these elements bleed beyond those borders, like, what is the frame? How is the frame, how do we understand the frame? I think it's very interesting how we might understand it as an artist, and then to say, okay, we're live in the frame, our representation of self is now live in this frame, in this video frame in someone's hand.
It is. It's framed. Yeah.
Right? It's very interesting, right? Like, we're like a live painting in someone's hand right now.
Yes, that's a great way to put it. And then when you turn it off, does it mean that you no longer exist? This is what I mean by philosophical, because I do believe, and this is why social media can be a negative thing, especially for the youth growing up today. If your whole identity is based on this frame and then it's off and you don't know who you are, that is the fundamental issue of the world today. Is when we define this, doesn't have to be about technology or social media. It could be the opposite. I know a lot of people that are more Luddites, where they hate technology and they really stray away from it, but they're also missing the points of connection that exist within the sphere. So it plays on a spectrum. I think, like I said, I'm all about bridge building because I do believe that being in the light, in the spiritual world, they call it light, but what I call it is balance. To be in balance is to see the light, to see that there's perspective on both sides, to see that there's actually good on both sides if you allow yourself to see it. But if I only shut myself off to the frame in which I'm in, which is why I say it's a metaphor, then you're never going to really see the world in its fullest form. But in order for you to do that, Aaron, I think you need to know who you are. It's a scary proposition to go to another view, especially if it's opposing to what you believe, if you aren't strong in the sense of who you are, because then you will feel defensive, challenged, perhaps even scared that that view might even penetrate you. And that's where it's all fear. It's all very fear-based.
It's very interesting, like the idea of like the view penetrating of the self.
Yes, yes. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I want to go more like because I think that's very interesting, and you know, as artists, observing the world and the and now this in social audio, video, word, like as we go more and more into the communication of the representation and this the two-way and then now ownership over these representations.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious, how do you find that?
So when I hear the word ownership, I also think of the word sovereignty. And what sovereignty is, and it's kind of relevant given what's going on in the States right now, is sovereignty over your full self, your body, your mind, your spirit, right? And that's where the tension lies right now, is who owns that? We do. We individually do. But more and more, we have energies at play that are challenging that ownership, that sovereignty. And if it's not technology, it's government. If it's not government, it's religion. There's all these facets. But going back to what I said earlier, if you don't know who you are, if you've never questioned who you are, if you've never questioned what you believe, you're susceptible to all of those factors. And then you push back hard. And this is where I find people that really push hard against a belief, I often wonder, have they even questioned their own? It's not that whether they're questioning mine. You can question mine all you want, but have you questioned your belief for you to feel that strongly that you can't even hear my perspective, right? And so this is why bridge building matters. This is why technology matters. It's the fastest way to get information out there. But if you don't have an intention to be that bridge between people, or certainly an allowing platform for people to connect, I guess is a better word, we're missing an opportunity. We truly are. And this is why social media is powerful. And this is why digital is powerful. It's the fastest way we can get information out there.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I'm very curious about this connection that you see within the technology, within how technology has been used to build these bridges for connection. Because I know a lot of people might be very hesitant. They might watch this, but to actually be involved themselves, to be the passive listener versus the active participant. Where do you find this this element between those two, the passive listener of that information versus the active participant?
It's a great question. I'm an intuitive person, so I go with where my thoughts go. And I actually had a conversation this past weekend that kind of is reminiscent of your question around activism versus social good. And since this is doing good, this is important. I sense that for me, listening is a superpower, first of all. I was really poor at it for a long time. I cared more because I was so conscious of how other people perceived me that I didn't pay attention and listen. I was more getting ahead of how it might be perceived. So I was like 10 conversations ahead, trying to present myself a certain way. And it was more out of protection and out of fear. So going back to your question, when I think about activism or social good, you can look at activism as somebody with, doing the signs and going out to Washington and doing all of the marching. And I think that's beautiful because I think we need those people. We need the people that are fired up by anger, by using anger and transmuting it into good. But then there's people like me that I might not be the person that is angry all the time, but I feel the anger. I might not be expressing it in the way that is perceived as, a strong activist type of platform, but my activism is actually more around connecting with people that don't feel seen because I didn't feel seen. And all of us have those feelings. I don't care whether you're in the family, you're not feeling seen, at work, you're not being seen. in society you're not feeling seen. It's a universal issue. And so I could spend my time, and like I said, we need all of these people. I could spend my time just voicing and expressing and fighting and really fighting the fight that way and expressing it out. Or I can spend the time listening, which is what I tend to do in these workshops that I do, and find out what's happening internally in people so that that can be expressed out. Because really what art to me is an expression of the inside out. It's a purge of what's happening in out. And the reason I find it so healing, Erin, is that it moves the people that view it. And you've seen that time and time again with all modes of creative expression. Even TikTok took off because I think people forget dancing is a form of creative expression. And so when people started to dance in the midst of the pandemic, I mean, that was powerful. It healed a lot of people. So I'm going on a bit of a tangent, but the answer is I think I'm all about balance. I do think it's important to listen, but then being conscientious enough to act on what you're hearing. And are you taking it to that next step? If you're only listening, that's great, because then you're internalizing it. But then what are you doing to act on it? And it doesn't have to look a certain way. Find your own path is important.
I think what we're talking about here is very interesting in the finding one's own path, and the listening and different ideas of what does social good mean? How does art relate to social good? How can people perceive social good in different ways, and what they can do, and what they can, and how they can be themselves? And
Yes.
I'd just be curious a little bit more about the different ways in which you see, social good going beyond the bounds of what, what might be like the first thing that people think of what is social good. Yeah, maybe you could explore that a little bit.
Well, I sense that, I mean, I'm going to just go to the crypto space, the NFT space a little bit, because that's where you and I met, but it's also where I feel my work and your work is important. It's not valued in the way it should be yet. Because why? When you look at the spaces where power and authority are held, it's usually associated with money and wealth. And so when you're in the arts and healing space or the social goods space, it seems like you're looking for the scraps of money that are coming in, right? We're fighting for the little change that people want to give, to donate, and to be a part of. And to me, that's flawed, because what's the exchange is this money. The money is the exchange. That's how it's measured, the value that it's measured. And part of the reason I'm in the Web3 space, and I have not figured any of this out. I mean, I'm really trying to navigate my way through it, is I want to see a point in time where Web3, where social good and arts and healing is valued in the same realm as a flip, or as, making a lot, because, and the only way we're going to do that is to show, how do you make money doing this? How do you show that you can create impact? And the reality is, I think we're trying to figure it out, because I've seen a ton of projects that are doing good, that are struggling to be seen. So it's not any different than an individual on a macro level, right? It's hard to be seen when the noise is all external validation of money and looks and all the stuff that I think, like I said, a persona of yourself rather than the internal. And so the question becomes, how do you, and this is why I think artists are so powerful, how do you express someone's full identity, full intentional, full purpose in a way that feels very holistic? It's not, you know what I mean? So you're reaching an audience that says, okay, I'm buying into this because I'm buying into the full aspect of Sheila or Sketchpoetic. And so that, I think, I mean, and again, I struggle with it because I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we're there in Web3, let alone in the real world, because I know a lot of my friends are in the nonprofit space struggling to raise funds right now, also because of where we are in the world. I think people are struggling in general. And I know that was a bit of a roundabout answer, but that's kind of the way my mind works, Erin, is that I try to break things down in the most simplistic terms, but it is a complex issue. It's not a simple answer. And for those that think it is, I think I feel like you're potentially not seeing the full picture of what we're up against. And there's a lot we're up against to make social good and arts and healing valued the way it should be.
What would that look like to you? as we move
Mm.
into that, as we move into that future, what does that look like? And how could we take those steps? I know there's a lot of people that feel lost and perhaps alone on that journey, especially
Yeah.
in the Web3 space, and being drowned out by uh, perhaps a shill or just another monotonous session. What gives depth to the soul in this space
Mm.
that allows the healing process and a shared healing process of the world to exist?
The reason I believe it's a complex question is there's two parts, and I'm speaking from my own experience, which is what this conversation is really about, is I can only share what I see and what I experience. Part of the challenge is the money part. So I'm going to go back to the money. Many of us have wounds around money. For me, money comes in, money comes out because I'm always giving. It's just the way I'm wired. But what it also means is I can't hold on to it. And if I can't hold on to money in that sense, of course I could hold on to it, but it's more, it's just my mindset is if I have a lot coming in, I want to give it out. That's just my DNA. But because I don't hold on to it, what ends up happening is I'm limited in what I can do. So I'm becoming more and more conscious of how do I do what I do, make money, and then use it to amplify the foundation which I'm trying to build rather than just constantly giving money away. That's one thing. Two, if you have a negative relationship with money. So for me, I always saw people with money using it to control, to have hold power, to diminish, to shame. And I watched, especially in the Asian culture in which I was raised. There was a lot of perceptions around Asian women that I grew up with. So I had that perception of money. So I really rebelled against it. I've always been a person, Erin, that said I need to make my own money. I never want to be dependent on anyone, to a fault, actually, because then I felt like I always had this like shield of protection around me. So there's that individual answer to that question. Now take that up again on a macro level. And if we're only focusing on the scraps of money that we can get, then what we're doing is we're really giving the power of the people that have the money. So the reason I think it's a complex issue is in my vision of where we'll be in Web3 is we actually do need the people with the money, that old money, talking about old money. Can we get them to see our perspective? Can we get them to see there's value in investing here, even if it's not a short-term gain, but a long-term one? But I don't think we're successfully showing that yet. I think right now it feels all feel good. It's all heart. And this is why I know I often wonder, how did I get here? Like I used to be in the business world. I've been in the corporate space for decades. And then suddenly I'm in the health and wellness space and spiritual realms. It was never the world I was in. And I'm realizing it's because I need to be able to talk to those people to get them to see that there's a much bigger thing at play than just making money, than having holding power. And there's such something bigger at play, but I can't have that conversation if I can't meet them where they're at. And that's my mantra. Meet people where they're at. Don't try to get them to see what you're seeing. Meet them where they're at and then try to, through inquisition and through curiosity and through questioning, let's meet. So yeah, my vision is, and I don't know who it is, Erin, but I have this vision of an individual, somebody that comes from that old money, that old sense of belief of power and authority, and them literally seeing the light and wanting to be part of this. But I do believe that we have to show the value of it, and that's why I'm here.
How would you describe where it is that you are to, because you're talking about showing it. What if you were to share a little bit of it right now, what
Yeah.
that looks and feels and how to understand a little bit of it?
I'll give you some very tangible answers. I've been hosting an arts and healing room in Clubhouse since January 2021. Okay. Then there was that whole NFT and I got sucked in on that. It was just perfect timing, but I was curious about what was happening because of the tech and innovation. I never stopped hosting arts and healing rooms. I went into the NFT space. I started hosting arts and healing spaces with artists that use art to heal. Became more, I built, the community was building around that. And then now, as I'm continuing on, I'm bridging the world of my Instagram. My Instagram community is very different than my Twitter community, and I'm trying to bridge that. I'm now making a pointed effort to do that as of yesterday, actually. So the answer is consistency, Consistency is not a sexy word for a lot of people, but it is the sexiest word for me, because when somebody's consistent, it makes you feel safe. When somebody's consistent, you see that they're invested in the long game, not the short game. So I'm not looking at numbers. I don't care if, when the bear market hit, I didn't freak out, but I also didn't freak out when I didn't sell a collection. Like my first collection sold out in like an hour. This last collection, I still have a number of pieces available, but I didn't judge it. I didn't measure my worth because of it. It's because I knew that this is just the journey that I'm on. So to me, a very simple answer is be consistent and show up consistently in the places in your relationships, in NFT space, as an artist, as a, in the way you connect with the world. But most people aren't consistent because it's scary. it's better to be I'm speaking from experience because I was that chameleon. If I was with you, I was one way. I was at work another way. I was a parent, I was this way. But I was never me. and and I will say sketching got me there. I'm passionate about my sketch poetic practice in my book because I wish somebody told me that art healed, and art allow me to find that inner peace that had eluded me my entire life. So consistency is my answer to you. Be consistent.
Now, as we look at the sketchbook practice, what are some elements of the sketchbook and process within the sketchbook that has really helped you and that you see might help others just to understand or feel, or maybe some of your experiences behind the sketchbook and that process?
Oh, I just got chills when you asked that question because it's the thing to me is the keystone to the reason I got to where I did. I've always loved art. I neglected it for decades, but I used to always doodle. Even I remember I had post-its after post-its on these conference calls, and I was doodling all the time. The answer is simple, but it's an invitation. Is being conscious of it. That's the healing. This is the secret that nobody wants to talk about. To heal is not to do anything. It's the moment you're conscious of something, that is the healing. Now, the question is, are you going to do anything with that awareness? So going back to your question, when I'm sketching, before I used to just doodle, it was mindless, truly mindless. I didn't think of it. It was very meditative, but it's taking it beyond the meditation. So now when I sketch and I make a mark, I pay attention instead of pushing away my thoughts, my monkey brain that's always on. I pay attention to what's flowing through, and a turtle shows up or a yellow dress shows up, and I'm like, that seems random. Back in the day, I would have thought that's random. Why would a turtle show up or a yellow dress? And you realize those are subconscious, unconscious thoughts flowing through because you're connecting with something. Now, the question is, do you want to make that connection more conscious, or do you want to just continue to let it be in the unconscious and subconscious? That was what happened, is I started to be more conscious. So when I was sketching, I was paying attention to what was flowing through like a current. I wasn't attaching myself to it. So part of it was just being detached to my thoughts, my emotions, my experiences. I was very attached to all of it. And so that's what sketching did for me, and what Sketchpoetic, what my practice is about, and what my book Sketch by Sketch is about, is how do we allow people to create, and it's done through prompts. I have 21 prompts, but the goal is, even if one prompt gets you to that connection, you will understand it. It's just it's a feeling. It's really a feeling. But when you're making marks, it's your unconscious and subconscious wanting to be seen. That's really what it is. Whenever you make any sort of mark, anything that you can externally see, it's just wanting to be seen. And the question is, are you allowing yourself to see it? Because most people don't. And not because of any other reason. They don't want to, or they're afraid to. And that's the reason I didn't see it for so long, because I didn't want to see it. It terrified me. There's like a Pandora's box out there, and if I open it up, it's going to be like a crazy disaster because there's so much inside of me I was afraid of. But then I realized all that crap was already inside of me. And it was showing up in freneticism, perfectionism, people pleasing, all the stuff that you hear about. Yeah.
So when we're looking at the kind of the subconscious becoming conscious and connecting with that flow, how does that move? How does that move us as individuals? How does that go beyond that to the viewer? And is that even necessary within your practice, is the viewer?
So when I think of viewer, I think of community. So that's such a, this is, look, I'm going to go to another philosophical tangent here, because part of the reason I wasn't an artist for as long as I was is because I had a viewer in mind. I had an audience in mind. When I was younger, it was my art teacher, then it became my peers and my parents. So when I think of viewer, I think of an audience. It's the reason why a lot of people don't create, because they have a viewer in mind. They have an audience in mind. But here's the thing. This is the thing that I discovered when I started to create, is the moment you start to create for yourself. So when I started sketching, I truly did it for me. I didn't do it because I was going to be on a gallery or I was going to show it off. The only reason I started my Instagram account is because I wanted some sort of accountability, like a journal that says, and it's a visual platform. I'm like, I'm going to do this to just timestamp it, to hold myself accountable. And I started tagging it. And that's how the community built, is that people just started watching the journey. But I didn't do it with an audience in mind, with a viewer. But here's the irony, is what I just said. The community started building because I was doing it for myself. So what ends up happening is like a magnet. People are intrigued by, wow, this person, and I used to sketch in coffee shops, and I would get this feedback all the time that when I created or sketched in a coffee shop, it was as if I had this magic bubble around me. Like, people were just intrigued, not by what was on the paper. They were intrigued by my energy, because I literally was sitting in the middle of a very public place creating for me. So they aren't exclusive. You create for you, and your viewers and audience and community will show up because they are intrigued by you showing up for you. And I think we need more evidence of that. That's what I'm saying about social media. Show up as you are in social media, and you will attract the type of people that you feel are, like I said, I believe that people attract certain energies that need to amplify their message. And so the more upfront and the more consistent you are in your messaging of why you exist in any space, then you will find, like, you came into my fold for a reason. You're amplifying my message, Aaron, and I'm grateful for that. At this point in time, by the way, we could have met a year ago. So none of that none of that I take for granted. I'm very grateful for it.
Well, it is interesting because we have crossed paths for the last.
Yeah, we've been in many different.
We've been in many
together.
similar spaces, but it's very interesting, the cross of like how we go from different platforms within social media, and what the different levels of connection from audio to video to large rooms and small, like what those are, I think, and in terms of messaging and the individual and creating, what those magnetic circles of us each doing our thing, yet like also looking beyond our circles. And I'm very curious about that, like that balance between, this passive viewing, like, oh, this magneticism, versus the creating our own magnetic, like walking towards the magnetic versus creating our own, and how to find that balance in the balance of relationship.
It's a fine balance. It is. It's a fine balance, especially if you are out there trying to reach other people. Because when you think of the word reach, you're purposefully trying to grab someone's attention. And the question is there a way to reach people without doing the grabbing? That just being in the presence of who you are. And I sense that it is a challenge. And listen, by the way, going back to art, I used to post daily. About a year and a half ago, I stopped posting daily because I noticed that I was sketching for my Instagram audience. And I didn't realize it until it got to a point where I'm like, this doesn't feel good. I lost the why. And so I stopped. And the good news is I'm very, very good about calling myself out whenever I feel that I'm not living up to my own mission. And so now I post like twice a week, 3 times a week. Doesn't mean I'm not sketching daily. It just means that I don't feel the need to share it as much as I did in the past. And so, yeah, I do think there's a fine balance when we think about viewer and audience and serving a greater good. Because in order to serve a greater good, we really are trying to reach as many people as possible. So there's this tension, right? There's this constant tension of doing it because you feel compelled to do it, but doing it not because you're trying to placate an audience or trying to make sure the audience gets you. That's not the goal. The goal is, and then again, the invitation is, do you know who you are? I'm going to go back to that. I'm still trying to figure that out, but more and more I am feeling more certain of who I am, more clarity in who I am through the journey of Sketch Poetic. Yeah, I don't have a definitive answer for you because I'm still in it. I'm still trying to figure out how do I do what I do without having to be in the face of everything. I'd rather be behind the scenes if you want my genuine feeling. I purposefully don't want to be out there all the time, but is that fear or is that a necessity? You know, and I don't have an answer yet, Aaron. I'm trying to find that balance where I'm not always out there.
Right, between the being visible and the overexposed versus
Yes.
the
Yeah.
not visible at all.
Yes, it's the balance. It's trying to find that balance but also that feels authentically aligned to who I am. Because I do know there was fear around it before. Like the idea of being seen was terrifying for me. Not anymore, but I also don't feel like I'm naturally a person that wants to be public speaking all the time or that wants to be on the TV. Like that's not who I just don't necessarily want that. I kind of want more Ernest Hemingway, Georgia O'Keeffe, being out there and just painting. Oh my God, that sounds like a dream. But we're in the age of social media. We're in the age of technology. And this is the fastest way to get a message across around what I believe is important. Art heals. Art heals. And I wish I had known. And I'm trying to get the word out about it.
At what point did you find the healing aspect within art, within it yourself?
I remember it vividly. I was in the coffee shop Verve. Shout out to Verve on 3rd Street in LA because that's where I sketched for almost 5 years, Monday through Friday. It was my breath. So for a long time, I would hold my breath. I didn't, I think I was conscious of it, but unconscious of it. Like I noticed that I held my breath whenever I was probably anxious or nervous or scared, but I was never conscious. And for the first time, I remember sketching and I was paying attention to my breath. Like, oh, it's so shallow right now. And so the answer to your question is the moment I started feeling my body, and I'm going to go to the psychology of what I do. Anybody that's experienced trauma or any sort of challenging situation knows it's pretty common knowledge of fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Our bodies are much more powerful than we realize. I used to think intuition was my superpower, my intuition, but intuition connected to my body is the superpower because intuition alone is powerful, but if you can connect, your body's trying to tell you stuff all the time. And so the answer is when I started to sketch and I paid attention to my breath, I could pay attention to the way my body would tense up if it was getting uncomfortable. And then when I stopped sketching and I did the same thing, that's when it became powerful. Creating and daily sketching got me to feel into my body again. And by the way, where I am in my journey right now is to be in my body more because I notice I'm in it and then I want to get out. It's very heavy. My body's a very heavy body, but not heavy in the sense of morose or dark. It's just heavy because it's carried so damn much my entire life. And so I feel it feels very weighted. So I'm trying to do more somatic stuff like dancing and movement. And I do my 2-hour beach walks now. So in addition to sketching, I do that. And connecting with nature is a big inspiration for me. But yeah, that's it. Breathing, believe it or not, it was that simple. It's when I started paying attention to my breath and never thought, and then I started to regulate my body more through my breath. That's why I'm a huge proponent of breath work and anything related to breath. It's our lifeblood. Yeah.
I'm really curious about this connection between somatics and the visual because so much I find divides those two and divides the breath is like another thing versus to utilize these different aspects together. And I find it very helpful for me.
Yeah.
And I'm very curious as you've bridged some of those gaps between these varied realms of understanding. how you've come to, bridge the visuals with the somatics, with the breath work, and what do you find that works, and what would you like to share from your practices?
Intuitively, I would say, I'm going to just say the word safety. So it is in the hierarchy of needs to feel safe. But our versions of safety, your version, Aaron, my version of safety, it feels very different. A situation that may make me feel safe may make you feel unsafe. That's why whenever I host rooms, I don't say I'm holding a safe room, because I don't know what makes you feel safe. So for me, I had this fallacy, and I'm going to call it a fallacy. So if there's anything I can share with your audience, I thought being good and doing good was enough. But the reality is I was that my entire life, and bad shit happens to people. Stuff that you never in your sphere of understanding thought could ever happen. And I remember in moments when that happened to me in my adult life, I remember yelling out to the gods and God and the universe, like, hang on, this is not cool. Like, I've been good my entire life. And it brings up emotion for me. And this happens. And you know what? As angry as I was and as enraged as I was at that truth, it liberated me. Because it allowed me to realize, why was I being good? I was being good to be safe. If I please everyone, they're going to not hurt me. If everyone likes me, they're not going to hurt me. If I'm perfect, no one's going to hurt me. It's flawed. But that is because I didn't know why I was doing those things. I was doing it because I didn't ever feel safe as a kid. And I grew up wanting to create that feeling of safety. And the answer, and this is again a very personal answer, but I'm sure it will connect with a number of people. The moment I started to realize, guess what? Bad things happen to people. There's no explanation for it. It's random as, the universe is random. But if I can find that inner peace and safety within that nobody else can provide but me, all this other stuff will happen. And yes, do I get nervous and scared? And of course, I'm human. But it didn't rock my world the way it does today. Like, I don't get triggered as badly as I did, to the point of like debilitation or escapism or, disconnection. So like I said, I still have moments of recognition when I'm disconnecting because I'm very overwhelmed by emotion or fear. But at least I'm conscious of it now versus spending my entire adult life not being conscious of any of this. So I don't know. That's why you will always hear me feel so passionate about art, because I didn't get there unless I wouldn't have gotten there unless I did my daily sketching. There's something in that profound moment of just recognition, of giving it permission to be seen. And when I sketched, it was to put my emotions out. And that's what my book's about. Like, how are you feeling? What does that feeling look like? So if I'm feeling fear, what does fear look like is one thing, but what does it feel like is another question. And so fear felt like this, or it could feel like this. I don't know, whatever. And that's what I was sketching. I was sketching the emotion. I wasn't sketching a thing or an object or an image. I was sketching the feeling. And the more I was in my feelings, the more I was grounded in who I was. Yeah. So again, that is the answer to the question, which is really safety for me. It was all about safety.
I think this is really interesting, as technology has given us a platform to speak about such things and the connective bridges of it, because I find it can be very much divided into realms of, this is the realm of safety and human now versus this is technology and online and the clouds and who knows the people and of the anonymity of it perhaps, and how to find that balance with feelings and groundedness, yet like why and how does this technology play a part of this realm?
I don't think we know yet. I mean, there's a reason shows like Black Mirror exist, because it is a terrifying proposition to think that technology moves at a speed that humans can't keep up with. That's the reality. That's what we're dealing with. Technology moves at a pace that humanity, our brains can't even keep up. I know apparent, you know, our human brains can, but guess what? In the Ethereum collective consciousness, spiritual, it does move at a much faster pace. So it's often measured by here, not by the presence of who we are. So the question becomes, can we, I mean, and it's a question, I don't have an answer. The question becomes, can we tap into our consciousness, our, you know, the collective consciousness in a way that still allows us to engage with something that is actually physically tangible? I mean, what is technology? It's, you know, code, it's waves, it's palpable. But the human soul is ethereal. You can't touch it, you can't measure it. It's why people have religious wars over faith, because there's no proof. You can't prove anyone is right or wrong in any of it. It's just a feeling. It's intangible. So the question is really, the reason I don't think we have an answer yet is, how does the intangible, which to me is all encompassing, very powerful, fight with something that's so tangible that we can actually see and measure. We can see the power of it. You can't see the power of this. The only way you see it is through humans, through people, right? The power of what, again, faith, consciousness, whatever you want to call this greater thing that's happening. There's something greater at play. But again, there's some people that don't believe in that, right? And, you know, my husband is a psychologist, and my daughter is 14, and I have some of the most profound conversations with both of them, because my daughter sees the world, and I try to sees the world a certain way that really is, I don't know, I hope she holds on to it. You know what I mean? When you're a kid, you see the world a certain way, but she's a very deep thinker, and my husband is an academic intellect. So I'm bookended between these two individuals. And we always have this conversation, why are we where we're at in the world today? And it's because I think people are questioning their beliefs and trying to hold on to something that is intangible. And we're uncomfortable with the intangible. It makes us uncomfortable to connect to something that you can't touch, or can't feel, and so that's why art is so powerful, because art is that. When you're creating, you are tapping into something, because where are these things coming? Where is it coming from? Nobody really knows, but for some reason, in the art world, we all accept that. We all accept it. Music, we all accept that somebody could compose an original score and nobody questions where it came from, because it's like, oh, they were just channeled, or they were inspired. But the moment you take it out of the context of art, it's a whole nother conversation. That's why I think art's important, because we are able to, something about art is so universally accepted of some of the most cryptic, complex topics, and we get it. We get it in art. We get the idea of improvisation. We get the idea of collaboration so easily in the art world. It's probably why it makes it easier to have this conversation.
So as we talk about the intangible, I find a very interesting thing, because like this video in some ways is intangible. You can't touch it, you can't feel it, but when it's viewed, maybe there's some feeling or understanding that comes out of it. It's beyond the screen.
Mm-hmm.
We're beyond the screen. Even as we're talking, we're beyond the screen.
Yeah.
And I find that very interesting as we talk about Twitter Spaces or Clubhouse and social audio, and it's beyond the screen. The connections are beyond the screen, but for some reason, there's certain people who understand how very real these connections and people are.
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, connection can be measured through physical, can be measured through digital, emotional. It's the moment we put judgment around what's more real. Is this more real than me going to meet someone at a coffee shop, or bumping into a stranger at a train? Is that more real? That's up to you. I no judgment on what you believe the answer is. But for someone like me, I don't think this connection is any less than my connection with my daughter in a park having a meaningful conversation. Now, listen, on the flip side, I could be having a conversation with my daughter and not connecting. And you and I could be on an Instagram live and we're just talking at each other. That's no less different to me than, so I've been observing the world, and there's just so much judgment around the way we show up and the way we perceive each other. And I just ask us to be a bit more compassionate that we are all trying to figure it out. None of us have the answers. None of us have the answers. And the moment somebody does, and somebody globs onto that, then that's what they were looking for. They were looking for something finite. I'm not looking for finite. I'm looking for being comfortable in the uncertainty without being completely disconnected from my body. If you want me, why I do what I do, that is what I do. I want to be connected mind, body, and spirit all the time. And I'm not always there because I'm human and I get triggered and I get overwhelmed. But I'm not necessarily talking about a monk on top of a mountain. That's not my view of it for me. Everyone has a different view of it. So let's find it and I just think art is a tool, is an avenue for it. And I just hope that more people know that. It's not for everyone, but I do think it will help a lot of people if they can tap into that connection, mind, body, spirit, that inner peace, that regulating of your body through music, dance, sketching, painting, and really doing it with that intentional purpose. Man, the world would be, I definitely believe the world would be a better place.
I find this really fascinating, the idea of utilizing these avenues, these kind of paths, the tools to find those spaces of inner peace and find spaces for connection, connectivity, without judgment of how that connectivity is. And I think that this is a very interesting thing for, as we come back, at a surface level of Web3 and NFTs and, what does it mean to connect, and to connect without judgment of this or that, but to connect at a human level.
Yeah.
And I'm very curious, how do you see this moving as we find what does it mean to connect as humans through non-physical means?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't know where technology is going to go, but I'm going to just speak to one of the mantras I talk about in Sketchpoetic. When you can fall in love with the process, not just the outcome, it's healing. So when you think of Web3 and when you think of the critics around NFTs, any of those critics around what's happening in this sphere, it's often focused on the outcome. It's the art, it's the money, it's all the endpoints. But when you're in the day-to-day like us, when you're in a Twitter space or you're connecting in a conference and we're having these human conversations, at the base core of what we all share is hope that it can be different. Truly. It's why I'm there. It's why you're there. It's why most of the artists, they all want to hope that there is a place, a point, a channel that you can make it as an artist and not be beholden to gatekeepers. That's what Web3 is supposed to represent. The reality is, are we challenged with Web2 and all the things that financial, art, all of the, technology, all the constraints that we've had in Web2, where we had gatekeepers all the time? We want to be sovereign. We want to have ownership of our creation. We want to make money. We want to make a living at it. And Web3 is a promise of it. Now the question is, can it really live up to its promise? But if people like me and you aren't out there in that space, and we only listen to the critics that are judging it because they have no idea what it's about, they're just judging it based on what media is telling them. They're judging it based on, of course, the environmental impact. I mean, that's a huge one. It's the reason my daughter hates NFTs. I don't judge it back. I don't try to defend it. I know why I'm here. But I'm not only in the digital space or crypto space, I'm also in the physical world trying to make change. So that's why I can hold myself to the highest good, because I know, again, consistent. I'm consistent. That is the thing, and consistency is key. So yeah, I don't know, Aaron, what the future of Web3 is, but I can fundamentally say, based on all the people I've talked to, we all hold that sense of hope, and that it is going to deliver on the promise of what we hope it can do. But we need people like us to continue to hold people accountable to it. And if we don't, then it just becomes another scary or Web 2. right? And so that I think there's themes in what you heard me say, but meet people where they're at, be the bridge, help listen to each other, but also help find those points of connection. And yeah, whether it's the digital sphere or the physical sphere, if you have a hard time connecting with people, you're going to have a hard time connecting with people no matter what channel you're on. So know who you are is the invitation.
I think that that's a very interesting thing, is to say going into this, because I know that there's so many people watching or interacting on the physical sphere that, you know, the physical sphere of Web3, and haven't necessarily delved into what those interconnections really mean beyond the physical.
Yeah.
And I find that kind of a challenging statement to say, know who you are going in, or is it, you know, do we?
No, it's an
People,
invitation to go know who you are. I don't
okay,
think you have to know who you are yet.
okay,
It's not yeah, I'm glad you clarified that. We are always invited to know who we are. I'm still trying to figure it out. So when I say know who you are, it, it's a point of curiosity and a constant state of questioning. It's not a statement. I know who I am. It's really a question. It's the constant inquisition and the constant curiosity. Curiosity is one of my core values, because the moment we stop being curious about each other, we the flip side of that is we get apathetic, we take each other for granted, we become righteous. It's all the things that curiosity combats. Judgment, it combats judgment. Even when I'm creating, the moment I become curious about my marks, all the judge and the critic, erodes. So yeah, I'm glad you clarified that, because I would hate for people to leave this conversation thinking, oh, Sheila's saying you should know who you are and that's it. No, I didn't know who I am. I'm still trying to figure it out. But the invitation is, whether it's Web3, in the real world, physical world, there's always these conversations that give you an opportunity to get to know yourself even more. And then the moment you can speak with, and when you believe something in your heart that comes from your sense of self, there's a different feeling about it. And you'll feel that shift, and it's different for everyone. So thanks for clarifying that.
It's very interesting, because to look at this Web3 as part of the journey of life, that it's not a separate entity, that it's in fact just an aspect of an extension of self, of an extension of our journey, just as our sketchbook might be an extension of our journey, an extension of our interactive, connective lives. I'm curious here, as we talk about the extension of the journey through these varied mediums that go beyond the physical to what does it mean to hold the intangible on a blockchain? What does it mean to interact and hold relationships over video, over audio, throughout the world, and be able to interact in a new sense of tangible.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I would say, going back to what we spoke about earlier, is balance. When the pandemic hit, and the only way we were able to connect, because we were pretty much sequestered in our homes, is through the digital sphere. Some people came out of it unscathed. Unscathed meaning it didn't affect them mental health wise as much as some others. And this is why I'm going to go back to balance. Anything in an extreme, whether it's a view, behavior, anything in an extreme, is never healthy, because what you're doing is you're pushing so far to one side that you've literally blocked a whole nother spectrum of possibility. And one of the visual metaphors I like to talk about is the pendulum. When you think of the pendulum, that's how I used to learn, Aaron, is I would be here and then I'd question and I'd be here. And I was always swinging from one side to another. That's how I learned. Like I really immersed myself in thought and beliefs. But what you find in the pendulum is the most powerful point of a pendulum is actually in the middle. It holds the biggest energy as it's moving from one side to another. And I believe that's a beautiful metaphor for balance of understanding opposing viewpoints, opposing belief systems. And even if he feels like, I feel strongly art heals. And if somebody came to me and completely debated me on that topic, the reason I can hold to that conversation is I have a strong understanding of why I believe it. And so, listen, the digital channel is just a channel. It's a tool. Technology is it doesn't have to be this terrifying thing if you're using it as an avenue, a vehicle to amplify your message and help you go and help you understand who you are. And I do think there's opportunities for that. But I would just say, if you're only connecting with people through this channel, just like if you're only connecting with people in the physical world and you're judging everyone that's on social media and judging everyone that's in the NFT space, to me, you're one and the same. Honestly, I've always believed that. You're no better than, neither one is ever better than the other. So let's try to find people and platforms that allow us to connect on that point. So I hope that answers your question. It really is kind of trying to find the balance of the physical and digital.
I love that. As we're wrapping up here, just the idea of the balance of the physical and digital, and at the end of the day, us being human beings, connecting, building bridges.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and if you're using digital to disconnect, you're doing that in the physical world too. That's all I want to remind people. There's nothing happening in here. Well, going back to the borders, whether it's a page or the frame of a mobile device, there's nothing happening here that isn't happening in the physical world. It's just that it's showing up, and we just have to want to see it and address it if we want to. It's an invitation. It always has been.
it's beautiful. Why don't you tell us where we can find you across your social media?
Sketchpoetic is pretty much it. It's so interesting that we're meeting in this point of time. Yesterday, I posted, I'm going to do a global Zoom call on July 15th and 16th for readers of my book. So my book came out December 28th in the UK and January 4th in the US. And I have purposefully, and this is an example of me embodying my beliefs, I could have done a lot to get my book out there more in the traditional sense. But I've let the book sit because I know it takes time to heal. It takes time to make that leap. Like, I know people that have the book and have not read it yet, but they want to, but they're not ready. So I gave it a good 6 months to see how long it takes for people. And so what I'm doing is basically inviting people that are my readers on my book that have engaged with it to come together as a global community and let's talk about it. How has the book been for you? What sketches changed you? What questions are coming up? How has it challenged you? Where can I help you deepen it, right? And so that's the goal of the conversation. But Sketchpoetic, if you pull that up, you'll find me. I'm pretty accessible. I think right now I'm just holding boundaries so that I have a good mental health and work-life balance between my worlds. But I'm pretty good about holding boundaries now. Thank you so much for having me. Hopefully it was a illuminating conversation. I know I felt a lot of I felt really light in this conversation with you.
Thank you so much for being here. Do you have any last words that I really, first of all, I just really appreciate you being here. Like, really appreciate you being here. And I know it's super early for you. And I
No, it's fine. I'm just grateful. I truly am. No, I don't really have any final words. I feel like I said a lot. So I'll just leave it with that. But yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. And I saw people joining. That's my nieces there. So yeah, it's great to have people flowing through. And I hope whatever we share today connects with someone out there.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you so much for watching. We were here today with Sheila Darcey of Sketchpoetic. I hope you've enjoyed and learned as much as I have. It's been a beautiful conversation. And again, I'm Aaron Jack at Aaron Jack Arts. We're here with Doing Good HQ, where you, the artist, can also be the philanthropist. So thank you so much. I mean, we've talked about so much, from technology and the channel of connection to arts and healing, and this idea of the container, you know? So I think there's so much within the ownership over the sovereignty within ourselves that we've talked about, and the ability to connect the breath with the sketch, the somatic, and connecting back with ourselves. So I think that there's so much here, and I hope you go back and rewatch this episode if you haven't already. And thank you so much. I'll see you next time. I'm Aaron Jack. Take care.